So welcome again. Thank you for engaging in the previous session. And I just took time to scroll through some of the comments earlier. Unfortunately, there was people who were saying that probably I was moving a bit too fast. The struggle is just the time that we have. It's a bit limited. But as much as you can take notes for as part of your portfolio of evidence, I do understand that the slides are going to be shared in PDF format. I think Brother Yanda will confirm that, but this is just based on what was shared yesterday, that they will be shared and they will be made available. So I hope that takes care of those concerns that were just being raised earlier on the charts. So session 2 or seminar number 2 talks about practical communication practices. Now we have the background that we have. I want to just start with a statement. And that statement will launch us into a poll or a quiz. And then we'll discuss from there. We'll try and be as practical as possible in this particular section because that's what it's requiring, and hoping to endeavor also to answer what Sister Noctula was asking earlier in the first session. So here's a statement by this author. Please don't ask me to try and pronounce that. The surname is CYR. The article is not dated. That's why you see ND in there. But it says, we hear only half of what is said to us. Understand only half of that. Believe only half of that. And remember only half of that. We hear only half of what is said to us, understand only half of that, believe only half of that, and remember only half of that. So, Brother Ayanda, can you launch us into the next quiz, please? Please keep that statement in mind. Right. So I'll read the statement in your hearing just again. If we hear only half of what is said to us, understand only half of that, believe only half of that, and remember only half of that. How much do we remember if we are told 12 things? I'm assuming others are looking for calculators and phones to calculate, which is also fine. Okay, we are on 50% of the poll.
It's bound to be a bit slow. It's mathematical.
Yeah, it's true, eh?
I'm thinking they had only half of the question. And the half of the question, and they will only remember half of that question. So how much do you think they will understand from your question?
And you're going to give us half of the answer. Just a lighter moment there. But there's a bigger question that will come after this quiz. All right, we are on the 70 mark.
We'll stop in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We close. Okay, right. So 28% say 6 things. We remember 6 things. If we're told 12 things, we remember 6. 7% say we remember 3. 20% say 1.5. 40% say 75, which is the majority, and 5% say 2.5. Right, let's see what it is then, what it is. So we hear 12 things. Half of that is 6. We remember or we understand 6 of that. Half of 6 is 3. So we remember, so we hear 6, we'll understand 3. And what we believe is half of 3, which is we'll hear 1.5, we'll believe 1.5, sorry. And then we'll only remember 0.75. Now it's a fraction of the things that we have been told. What does this say about how human beings communicate and hear each other? Or in other words, talk and communicate and listen. We're talking of writing, hearing, listening, and all that which we spoke about in the first session. And the fundamental question is this: what does it mean for memory verses? And I'm deliberate in pausing. It's not the network.
There's something in the chat, Doc. Please read it.
In the chat. Is my mate wrong? Which one, Brother Anda? Or is this for all genders? Because I feel like my wife remembers everything. That's a good lighter moment there. Unfortunately, the researcher didn't conduct the gender, or did not include the gender aspect. It's just general. It's just general. So I thank you for that, my brother. It's actually quite a lighter moment. But the fundamental question that for me I asked myself when I read this, I said to myself, what does this mean for memory verses? I could only reach the conclusion that I need to do more for me to boost that which I can remember. Which means you and I, we have to communicate with God more than what we are currently doing. Just at the level of Bible study, just at the level of understanding and remembering the things. Because when the Bible says, I think it's in John 14, where it says the Holy Spirit will bring to remembrance. It means we have to do the heavy lifting to put that which the Holy Spirit will bring to remembrance in our minds. And that will not come easy. I will talk to this probably later on when I speak about learning styles, right? I think it should be the next or the last session. But it's critical. Every one of us has a mind and a brain that is capable of understanding. The effort is putting information in that brain. Then we are able to actually train the brain to get to the level where it's supposed to be. So I thought maybe let me put it at the start of this particular session, because it's quite important for our work as Christians. Now, effective communication, what it is about. There's a research that was done by Robinson, Segal, and Smith. And these authors are sharing insights with us that when we communicate, we need to have clarity of what we are saying. If you look at the picture there that I've put, And if you're like me, you go for eye test, there are certain things that are haze without glasses. And the moment you are given the correct lens or correct prescription, there are certain things that become clearer in vision. So it's the same with us as well when we communicate. So effective communication is about understanding the emotion and intention behind the information that is being given. Right? So we want to understand the emotion and intention behind the information that is being relayed there. That is what effective communication seeks to achieve. And we need to have the ability to clearly convey that message. Now, there are many things that come into play, the language, the command of the language that is being used, the mannerisms, the body language, and all these things. So we need then to cultivate that aspect of, putting these ingredients together. A meal is made up of different things. There's onion, tomatoes, garlic, and all these things. So our effective communication has to have a mix of these for us to be effective in what we are communicating. And also, as we saw in the first session, that effective communication has to involve listening in a way that gains full meaning of what's being said. Half-truths are dangerous. When we listen to what we just want to hear and then we pick up that, it's usually dangerous in communication. So when we're communicating and we're talking of effective communication, we want to listen in a way that we gain a full meaning of what is being said by whoever we are listening to. This also means that, this also makes the person or people feel heard and understood. So when we are communicating effectively, the people with whom are the intended, the recipients of the message, they need to feel that they've understood what is being said. And the one who is communicating need also to feel that they are heard. In other words, they've managed to convey the message to the people, to the audience, in a way that it is what it was meant to be understood. And that on its own fosters our learning as human beings. So as human beings, we ought to be creatures of learning. We ought to be creatures of learning. Like what Romans 15 verse 4 to 6 actually says to us, that whatever is written, it is written for our learnings. That we, through the patience and the comfort of the scriptures, we may find hope. So sometimes when we don't effectively read out there God's word that he has given to communicate to us effectively so that we can understand this God, we're denying ourselves the comfort that the scriptures will give us. We are denying ourselves the learning that we obtain from the scriptures themselves. So effective communication has got all these elements that I've just highlighted, and they are important for us to be able to reach out and communicate effectively. One wants to avoid, right? One wants to avoid saying one thing and then others hear something else. So in other words, there's a break somewhere there. What the intended message was and how it was received are diverging. In other words, they are not the same. And this gives rise to a lot of misunderstandings and frustrations and conflicts, right? Misunderstandings, frustrations, and conflicts arise from the mere fact that what has been said and what has been understood are two different things. This also can cause problems in the home, in the school, and in work relationships. And sometimes these things are not really necessary for us to have. If only people can just take a step back and pause and say, hold on, where did our communication break? And you retrace your steps. Like the Bible says in Jeremiah, we need to go back to the crossroads, the old pathways, then we can follow again. It's important when we're communicating that we have to trace back so that we avoid these things. Some things are just mere misunderstanding. mere words that have been used inappropriately that end up causing divorces, strife in the home, in schools, even at work. Relationships are broken simply because of that brokenness that would have happened or that would have occurred. Now, as leaders, we need to be able to have some clarity and articulate what we want to say. Like that child there, she's using binoculars to focus where she's looking so that she can have an understanding of what needs to be done. In the leadership context, you need to be, as a leader, set out the vision, the mission, the goals of the club as an example. The mission, the vision, and the goals of the church, if you're an elder or a church leader or a departmental leader. You need to be, these things need to be clearer in your mind before you attempt to actually convey them to somebody else. If you are not sure about certain things, there's always people you can talk to who can help you to clarify your thinking. Now, this is quite important because even us in research, we find that when we start with students and you're supervising them, the thinking is not clear, it's fuzzy, but you can understand what the person is an idea which they want to convey across. But the way it's being articulated, it needs focus. The supervisor then is there to guide, to ask questions, to probe. And in asking these questions, it's designed to actually shape the thinking, to sharpen the focus of your thinking. And this is why the listening and getting feedback becomes important, because it shapes the clarity, or it helps you to clarify your thinking. So in this way, this child is using binoculars to actually be able to clarify the vision, to be able to see far from where she is sitting right now. So as a leader, you need to have clarity of thoughts, clarity of your communication with regards to the vision, the mission, and the goals of the department or whichever aspect you are leading. The second aspect of a leader's need to be articulate is that of governance aspects. Now here, yesterday, Sister Lindy or Officer Lindy was speaking about issues around risk assessment, issues around volunteer forms, issues around all these things that we need to do as we work through with our pathfinders. These need to be clarified. And what I often find in our church, in most places, is this: leaders receive information, it's communicated to them, but then it ends there. It's not communicated to the counselors and the club instructors and even the children themselves. And that on its own causes a lot of commotion and problems unnecessarily within the club. So as a leader, these things, you need to be able to clarify them and explain them. And again, not only is information not cascaded down, information, the way it's cascaded down, again, it's also problematic from the medium used in the first place, the words and the language that has been used in the second place. And thirdly, if you can then just try and have someone who would check your messages. So for example, when I want to write an email, my wife and I, we have a habit of, please, can you just listen to this, or can you read this? Does it make sense? Obviously, we consider sensitivities around some of the issues which cannot be shared. But in common announcements, common information that needs to be passed on to the people, we clarify each other. What are you trying to say here? It's not coming out as what you're saying, because sometimes what you are wanting to say, what you are writing are two different things. So try by all means, try all means, correct English, try all means to be able to make sure you communicate, especially issues around governance of running the club. We are living at this point where, I think Brother Tabani was highlighting this yesterday as well. We are living at a time where there are a lot of things that are happening. We can't trust people as we used to. Yes, we need to preserve our Christian brotherhood by also protecting one another. That can only happen when we communicate information in an effective way. And as leaders, we articulate it in the way it's supposed to be articulated. And also, we need to provide pertinent information that is relevant. Sometimes we need to weigh the options. So for example, you get into a meeting, there are debates and what, and all these things, commotion that is going on. Eventually we reach a conclusion. What needs to be communicated is actually the conclusion, not the debate, who said what and who did what and all these things. Those serve to be just noise that might end up conflating the message that needed to be conveyed. So communicate pertinent information. So what effective communication does, just a few pointers there. It builds deep connections with people or with others. When we communicate effectively, it builds deep connections. It builds trust. It helps everyone to express themselves, and it helps to avoid a lot of misunderstandings that may arise. So we really need to make sure that before we open our mouths, before we put our fingers to the keyboard, we have clarity of thought and we know what the message that we need to put across. And with effective communication, it has to be purposeful, right? And in being purposeful, you have to have the vision of the road where you are going, which direction you are going. Yes, we don't know what tomorrow holds, but at least in the mind of the leader, there has to have purpose. What message are you trying to put across? So you need to have the clarity of the message to be conveyed in the mind of the reader. You have to have the right tone, especially when we're talking to the teenagers. I'm learning that in my own home. I have a teenage daughter. The tone matters. The tone matters, and we really need to embrace that and make sure and when it's pointed to us that, hey, your tone was harsh, we need to try and accept that, apologize, and we move on. Then there are also techniques that we need to use, right? So let me just give an example, which is probably two examples that are common. If I say to you, I have a dream, what comes into mind? Martin Luther, right? If I say to you, yes, we can, what comes into mind? Barack Obama, when he was campaigning for the presidency. So these are themes that, the speech or the message is thematized. There are themes in it that helps in remembering the core messaging, right? And we remember these things because they are catchy phrases that help us. And they are done purposefully. When they are said, how they are said, are actually designed to help the audience to remember the messaging that is being put across. So again, timing is important. When to pause, when to say the slogan or the theme, and when to repeat it. That's what we mean or that's what I am referring to when I'm talking about the communication has to be purposeful, so that you want your audience to be able to remember. Remember our quiz about the 12 things, 0.75, that is finally remembered. So to help or to aid that remembrance, these are some of the things that are used. And again, things like songs can be used. We'll talk about it when we talk about learning styles. Things like songs are used to help the children to remember memory verses, to remember certain things. So these are some of the things that effective communication actually entail. Now, let's quickly take 3 polls or 3 quizzes here. Brother Ayanda, let's just quickly launch three quizzes. Quiz number 2. So I banged on this that probably most of us could be familiar with Philippians 2 verse 1 to 5. But if not, I'm hoping and trusting that you have your Bibles with you. You just quickly refer to it. And we're saying what spiritual principles relate to a healthy and effective communication that we find in that aspect of Philippians chapter 2. And by the way, if your option is not on there, if your option is not there, choose the one that is closest. choose the one that is closest. Some of it was purposeful in the sense that I wanted to just restrict audience to these options that are provided. The polling is actually going quicker than I feared, but I thought maybe it would take a bit longer. Okay, we're just about to get to the, we're now on 50% of the poll. Okay, we'll close the poll in 20 seconds. Just for the sake of time, nothing, no other reason really, just for the sake of time. Okay, all right, so I will just end the poll just for the sake of time. Right, so 10% says do nothing out of selfish ambition. The highest there being 46%. I actually agree with all the options apply, because if you look at what is in Philippians 2:1-5, this actually gives us the basis of effective communication, in the sense that when we communicate, try and limit as much as possible selfish ambition or vain conceit there. And we try and do our communication with much humility, right? And again, not looking only for our interests. You realize there are a lot of people around us who communicate or who do things because there's something in it for them. And that becomes then the focal point of everything they do, the communication they engage in. And usually it's problematic because it's all about them. And that on its own becomes a greater source of conflict. Like James said, where do conflicts come from? They come from our own selfish ambitions and all these things. Not that there's anything wrong in being ambitious, but when the intent of the ambition is to get a benefit at the expense of others, at the expense of hurting others, then that cannot be the right way of communicating. And also with all humility, and also with respect to others or towards others. I personally think that all the options will apply in this particular case. So Brother Ayanda, if you can then just also shoot up the second one. This one is based on Romans 15 verse 1-2. While the poll is coming up, it's making reference to Romans 15 verse 1-2. So Brother Ayanda, if you can shoot the second poll for us. Sorry, it's actually poll number 3, yes. Thank you. So we are asking here from Romans 15, 1-2, which statement is not aligned to spiritual principles relating to healthy and effective communication? Which of the statements that will be provided or that is provided there is not related to that. All right, we'll close in 30 seconds. We're just about 55% of the poll. All right, so just purely based on time, I will just end the poll just now. So the one from where I stand, the one that is not aligned to the spiritual aspect is each man for themselves and have the right to be heard and to choose. So once we engage in communication with that kind of mindset, it then tends to be self, and disregard the, that communication is actually sort of like a two-way process. You have got to be heard, and you also need to hear others. You've got to listen, and you also need to be listened to. So we need to be just also careful with that. Where it becomes about self, usually challenges arise there, and wars, divorce, conflicts, misunderstandings, and all these other ills will arise from there. We'll just do the last one. I think this is the last of the polls in this particular session that we'll consider just for now. Brother Ayanda, just the fourth one to the end. And as we get through, we're looking at from Ecclesiastes 5, verse 2, what would you value most? From Ecclesiastes 5, verse 2, what would you value most? So you have got two options there. You're just choosing between those two. What would you value most? And bearing in mind, we're talking of effective communication, right? We're talking of effective communication there. What would you value most? Okay, we're just about 55% of the votes in. We'll give it another 15 seconds. All right, so just based on time, we'll just close the poll, certainly just on time. I see that on 79% of the people say they would rather just not utter words hastily. In other words, they're not quick to speak. It's actually very important sometimes to do that. But what is even of equal importance is to listen. Yes, we may take time to speak our words out, but what is of equal importance also is to be able to listen as well. Fewer words, others about 21%, which is the remaining. Just said would rather just say fewer words. But again, in your words, in the few words you say, may they be kind, may they not be too harsh. Because I know of people who they speak not that often and they don't speak many words, but when they open their mouth, you can be sure that there are guns blazing that are coming there or bullets that are coming out. Now, what stops us from communicating effectively? Now, I'm using this picture sometimes to say that this door locked. There's no door there, right? And the way I thought about it is this. Sometimes when it comes to communication, we actually stop ourselves based on what we are going through, right? So these are internal factors that affect our ability to be able to communicate effectively. We'll go through just some of them now. In other words, we are putting the limit on ourselves, whereas we can actually work out and be able to improve our communication. Now, stress and out of control emotions is one of those things that stop us from communicating effectively. Now, this usually stress and out of control emotion, they trigger knee-jerk behaviors. So in other words, we lose all rationality. We then start just firing whatever is coming out of our mouth. And there's one thing with words. Once they are out, you can't take them back. Yes, we can apologize, we can say, I'm sorry, we can do all that. But that pain could have been avoided if we had not just embarked on a knee-jerk reaction. So we need to try as much as possible to exercise temperance, because failure to do that, it erects a barrier that will affect our effective communication or for us to communicate effectively. So as a person, you need to be able to make sure that you don't communicate if you're stressed out. So when the debate or the talk is getting heated, try to find something to just tell yourself to pause and calm down first. Then we'll come back. We'll talk about it when we talk about the strategies or mitigating strategies. So stress and emotional issues become problematic with regards to communicating effectively. Then there's also lack of focus. There are people who believe in multitasking, but neuroscientists are actually also finding out, there's one in particular, Dr. Leaf, she has found out that this multitasking business is not actually effective because something is bound to suffer because your attention is divided. I know women will argue with me. My wife always argues with me that they can multitask. But it's when we then point out, oh, that thing, what happened, or that thing happened, you realize there's a lot of things that are half done, they're not complete because the attention was divided. As well as if you are communicating with someone, non-verbal cues are actually missed out. Non-verbal cues are actually missed out because we are focusing on too many things at the same time. And we know that non-verbal language is also part of the communication. Then also, one thing that stops us from effective communication is misaligned body language. So in other words, your non-verbal communication is at variance with your words. So I've seen preachers who talk and say, our Father in heaven, but they are pointing downwards. But we know heaven is where? Heaven is up. So there's that disconnect between the body language and the words that are coming out of the mouth. So that stops effective communication. So we also need to be aware of those things. Then there's also issues around negative body language. Like I said, body language is part of our communication toolkit. When someone is beginning to be disinterested, you can pick it up and you can quickly adjust your communication approach or your presentation style so that you keep people interested. Unfortunately, on this Zoom, there's no way of me telling whether, but if I'm in a lecture setup, I move around the lecture hall. I move around. I try to establish a eye contact with the people around so that I can see if I'm still being able to reach out to the people that I'm communicating with. But I'll also then just throw the question that I threw in earlier to say, just be careful. I gave an example. I'm comfortable standing like this to support my back because I've got back issues. But psychologists will tell you it's a sign that someone is closed up, they will not open up. So just be very careful how you use that aspect of communication. So you, as a human being, make sure you're doing that. So having identified this gap that is there or that can exist or that can stop us from communicating effectively, you know, what strategies can we do or can we put in place to mitigate these issues or for us to begin to work around that which is stopping us to communicate effectively? So stress out when you are, or if you are stressed out, number one, just give yourself time to think and reflect on the situation. In other words, breathe. So there are some who, when they start talking, they don't breathe. It's word after word, word after word, word after. And this is where you limit your thinking before you actually speak. And when that happens, we're bound to say words that would then, if they are hurtful, we will not be able to take them back. So to avoid situations like that, breathe, stop, reflect, think. When you've calmed down, you can then come back. Next point is articulate a point at a time. Don't bring too many things at the same time. And already I've just seen it, like I said, I was just scrolling through the charts that there's also one that was saying it's just too much information. I appreciate that. Information overload also can hinder effective communication. It's just that the time limit factor is what is a challenge. And we are also aware that data is also a challenge for everyone to be connected all through and through. So as a result, it becomes a sort of like a hindrance in effective communication. It's not an excuse, but it's just the reality that we are faced with. So when we communicate, it's a point at a time, 1 point at a time, 1 point at a time, deal with an issue, not the person. And if we do that, we might overcome some of the challenges that we encounter with regards to effective communication. Deliver your words clearly, even tone, and keep eye contact. And again, I mentioned on the eye contact, beware of cultural issues. I expanded on that. But what I want to say is on the tone there. So the tone also is an important aspect. When we shout and we do these things, we might actually end up having problems. So our tone has to be modeled in a way that if it's concern, it has to express concern. If it's excitement, it has to express the excitement. If it's sadness, it has to express the sadness, the sadness, sorry, that is there. So as a people, when we trying to effectively communicate, these are some of the things that we can mitigate or strategies we can mitigate. Try also to recap your main points. So you've put your points across, try to recap them so that you remind your audience what has just been said and what the main take-home messaging is with that you want them to get. As we continue with that, generally, as people, we need to be aware of the stress signs within us. So self-awareness becomes a big issue. You know when you're getting irritated, you know when you're getting to a point where you're getting stressed out. The moment you see these telltale signs, find a way of stepping aside, be calm, calm yourself, exercise temperance, and emotional intelligence comes in here, where we need to control ourselves and reconsider. We can shout at kids and they'll just look at you and they're like, where did this come from? What is he saying? What has just happened? It's because we would have lost it. And we also need to reconsider if I am not taking the issue too far. So sometimes a joke is put out there. What happens? We become emotional about it and we start shouting. We need to stop and think, am I not taking this issue too far? Was it meant to get to this far? Sometimes we need to just find humor in some of these things. And I'm saying all these things. I've also suffered from these things, but it has also taken me a conscious effort to work through this. I work through this, and so many times, even to my own children, that will happen, and then I'll say, oh, no, sorry, I actually overreacted. I'm sorry about that. And then we move on, you know. And I know with us men, it's very difficult to apologize, but sometimes it's not necessary for us to go through this pain when we can easily retrace where we have gone wrong and share, and apologize, and then we are forgiven and we move on. And also be willing to compromise. Sometimes if your kids, especially in the home, even when you're dealing with your pathfinder class, compromise with them. I have kids here at my house, my companion class, they're doing some classwork here today. And they came last night and I was just talking to them yesterday, like, but uncle, we've just eaten, we're tired. Can we do this tomorrow? So we reached a compromise. And when we woke up in the morning, it was not an issue. So guys, remember yesterday, you said you didn't want to do this, but that's the first thing we're going to start with today. So that also, it also enriches the communication that exists between the counselor as well as the children in the class. And sometimes you just need to agree to disagree without breaking anything. It's also permissible in life. You don't have to fight. We don't have to agree on everything. And sometimes where there are differences, let's just agree to disagree. We remain brothers. We move on. It doesn't have to be that painful. Also, a mitigating strategy as well could be just focus on a multitasking means that something is suffering from attention deficit. Stop multitasking. Focus on one thing at a time, finish it, move on to the next. You realize with regards to time, you really have not saved that much. Try it and see it for yourself. The next one is be aware of and manage your body language. This one, I struggle. For years, colleagues, my own children and my own wife, they tell me that my face is scary. But I've been trying to find ways of making it not scary. I'm aware of it. I've been trying, but I think I'm getting better to that point, to a level where it's okay. So I'm also just saying, be aware of self-awareness. Again, that point comes back. Be aware of your body language. As you are aware of your body language, as you communicate, you are in a position to be able to say, oh, okay. You remind yourself of certain pitfalls or certain things that become a hindrance to effective communication as well. So that might be helpful, but it takes you identifying those things first before you can engage in them. Now, let's talk about assertive communication. And I think this is where Sister, is it no? Oh, now her name is just Noktula, yes. Sister Noktula, I think, was getting to, and she was now asking a question. Being assertive is very important, right? It's very important. And like I said, it's not unchristian. Let's understand that. It's not unchristian to be assertive. Now, let's look at what assertiveness is and what it is not, right? What assertiveness is and what it is not. So what assertiveness is one expressing their thoughts, expressing their feelings and needs in an open and honest way, while standing up for themselves and respecting others. I'll take it up again. What assertiveness is expressing oneself, expressing one's feelings, expressing one's needs, and being open and honest in the way they are communicating, right? And they stand for what they believe in. But they do so in a respecting manner. In other words, they respect others. It comes down to the how. Usually that's where the problem is. It comes down to the how the thoughts, the feelings are expressed. Now, here's my take on it. If I tell you how I feel, there's no other person who has a right to tell me that my feeling is wrong. From a communication perspective, you can't tell me that my feeling is wrong because I'm simply expressing how I'm feeling. Right? So there shouldn't be any boundaries there. In as much as one needs to think through the how, but room has to always be there to express one's feelings, one's thoughts, and one's needs in an open way. And you want your children, if you're taking a Pathfinder class or an adventurer class, you want them to be able to express themselves. Because it is in the talking that you connect with them. I've often also found out that some kids become so open in class than they are with their parents. Right? And sometimes you get to a point where you say, okay, I hear you. Have you discussed this with your parents? You say yes or no. If they haven't, you then can ask, do you mind if I can share this with your parents? Right? They will then give you the permission to say, yeah, you can talk to them. But some will say, no, don't. Don't. The child is then confided in you. You then need to find a way of handling it as an adult. So you can't block the children from actually expressing how they are feeling. So it's one critical aspect that we need to be able to appreciate. The second aspect is, assertiveness is not, and please understand, assertiveness is not being hostile. It is not being aggressive. It is not being demanding. And often I think we miss the two and we conflate them. As a result, we fear expressing ourselves, or we are told this one should just keep quiet because they're too rough and all these things. We just need to cultivate a better way of expressing ourselves without coming across as too hostile, without coming across as being aggressive and too demanding. So I hope that clarifies the thing. We can take it up as well during our question and answer session. Now let's look at how we can improve assertiveness, right? How can we improve assertiveness? So firstly, we need to value ourselves and we need to value our opinions. I'm one person growing up, I would rather keep quiet than say out something because I thought, oh, okay, what if my thing is stupid or what I want to say is, and that on its own suggests lack of confidence. That on its own suggests that we place a limit on the value of our thinking and our ability to express ourselves, right? So try to get out of that shell, and you can always try to do this in a safe space. And what I consider the safe space is your home, your friends, even your children. I have two daughters who are very candid. They will tell you straight up what it is. Sometimes it comes across as painful, but as an adult, when you sit down and you reflect, you realize, no, actually, they have a point. So try to value yourself and your options or your opinions in a way that you boost your confidence, right? And remember, it's your opinion, and no one can actually say your opinion is out of the window. Know your needs and your wants. Sometimes people dictate these things for us because we don't know what we want, we don't know what we need. So we need to learn to cultivate understanding of what we need, what we want, and how we are able to actually just express it as well to others. So that's another area we can improve with regards to improving our assertiveness. Express negative thoughts in a positive way, right? Express negative thoughts in a positive way. I will come back to this one as I talk about developing assertiveness communication techniques. I'll come back to this particular aspect. But we need to always ask ourselves, is everything we consider negative actually negative? What learnings can we take from these negative things and we turn them into positives? Like I said, I'll come back to it as I talk to the next slide. We also need to receive feedback positively, right? Let us accept those developmental areas and improve on them so that we can improve and become better communicators as well. So like I mentioned, in academics feedback, people will tell you point blank. I remember I presented a proposal, a research proposal in an international conference, and there were 3 professors there who had reviewed this proposal. And the one who gave feedback first hammered me so hard. It was so painful. But I was warned about this guy. And somebody had said to me, Taps, if this person starts doing this, he is like that. So don't take it personal. Don't argue with him. Because at the end, he is a professor and you are not. People will always think that the professor is right. So when he starts arguing, just say to him, I've noted it. And take note of, you can just take a note of what he's saying. So I took the counsel. I listened to what this guy hammering me. And it didn't take me defending myself or saying anything. The other 2 professors then said, no, but what you are raising issue with is actually covered in the full document. You would not have expected him to do this in 15 minutes. So I didn't have to say anything. But from the feedback he gave me, though harsh it was, and the other 2 professors came to my defense, there were positive things I actually picked from what he said, and it clarified my thinking. And that's the point I'm just trying to put across. Yes, feedback might be harsh and difficult to swallow, but see positive aspects of that particular feedback. And I also just want to talk about to this, where we're saying learn to say no, right? This is quite important because I saw it with my own siblings. My father died when we were 17, and I had to play a greater part in raising my own siblings. And obviously things become tough, and as things improve, as I started working and God continued to bless and resources were available, I ended up realizing that they would just ask for things. And I realized, no, at some point I need to teach communicate the right messaging to these kids. I'll begin to learn to say no. And what I then discovered, and I asked myself, what damage am I causing to this particular person I'm communicating with by saying yes to their request every other time? So assertiveness also means if we foresee a situation that this thing is bad for this person, we come out straight and say to them, no, you can't continue doing this. If there are kids in the class, again, we need to be able to learn to say no, because us not saying that, we might end up doing more harm than good. So that's the point I'm just wanting to put across there. Now, as we continue to, let's talk about assertiveness. Let's look at how we can develop assertive communication techniques. So the first one is try to be empathetic, right? Convey sensitivity, right, to other people. Then state your needs. So for example, one statement that I'm just giving as an example is like, so for instance, if there are issues in the home, I know we are busy as in families, either husband and wife, that's the example I'm going to use now. When there's a husband and wife, we are all busy at work to a point where we can't give each other time. So how you can put that across is, I know you are busy or very busy, but our family needs also time, right? So I'm starting by acknowledging and empathizing with the busyness, how this can be hectic for this person. But that is not stopping me from highlighting also another important area of our family, which is what? Spending time together. So if it means booking time in your diary or in the person's diary or your spouse's diary, please do that. That's also part of assertiveness, right? So it just reminds me, I think it was on Thursday when my wife was just saying, what are you doing on these 3 dates in the end of this month? And I said, nothing at the moment. Like, please, can you book this? We're blocking this. We're going to do something as a family. So that's part of it. You have to be able to do those things. Then also escalating assertion. In other words, use when first efforts yield little. So in other words, you need to escalate, be firm. You escalate that firmness if you are realizing that your first efforts are not being heeded to. So you increase your firmness. I often realize with my class. So sometimes we do things lightly, and then when it's time to get serious, they continue, and then I have to escalate. Guys, no, it's now serious time. I've given you work to do. Let's focus on our work. Obviously, intermittently, they will throw a joke here and there, and it's part of the package. It makes the lessons and the learning, good and also light. But you have to remain in control of what is happening. So you escalate if your initial efforts are not yielding much. Then the other thing is you practice assertiveness in lower risk situations to improve confidence. In other words, you can practice some of these things we've talked about in safe spaces or safe environments. Talk to your family, friends, give them feedback and all that. So if you're going to give a presentation, start it within your home. They give you feedback. It's better there, and it also boosts your confidence if you get the feedback, because when you do it in front of the audience, you would have done it already. So it is sort of like calmed your nerves as well. So those are some of the things you can do. So the other thing that you can do is use the I statements to share your opinion, right? Use your I statement to share opinion without actually sounding like you're blaming or attacking anyone. So let's look at some examples. And this is what I was mentioning earlier when I was saying that I'll come back to the other point there. So instead of saying, that's not right, rather say, I see it differently than you do. Right? So the I is coming in there, and you're saying, this is me expressing what my view. I see it differently from you. So you're actually disagreeing in a much more positive way, in a way that highlights that your view is different from this person's view. So that person cannot argue that, no, your view is not, because that is your view. The next one is, instead of you saying, you are really irritating me, right? Rather say, I'm feeling really irritated right now. So you're simply saying, this is me, this is how I'm feeling, and it's for this moment. It's not every other time. I'm saying it's for this moment, it's right now. And the last example I have there is, instead of you saying you're not listening to me, right, which is more of accusation, right, or it's accusatory in tone, rather say, I don't feel heard. So you are saying, this is what this is me, my point of view. I don't feel heard. The problem could, maybe it's not you who is speaking to me, but me who is hearing the message. I'm not feeling that I'm being what? I'm being heard. So those are some of the techniques or examples that one can actually use. So I will stop there for now. That was my last slide. Brother Tabana, I'll yield control to you for comments, feedback, and anything else that might come up.
Thank you, Brother Tapiwa, for that presentation. Very powerful presentation. I believe that now we open for comments and questions. Then after the comments and questions, we are going straight into the last presentation of the day.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Okay. I used to have an issue at work. I remember I was supervised by this young lady who was very young. And then she always complained about me to her supervisors, which is our chief. And then the chief told me that I have this, I don't know if it's intimidating character or something. So I want to understand what is the problem with me, because if I'm intimidating someone with just a look, what must I do? Like, how can I be helped? Thank you.
My sister, you and I have the same problem, so I don't know how we can help each other. Because people, yeah, particularly even from my own family, they say my look is it looks angry, but what I have sought to do, I would say probably since 2014, 2015, thereabout, I've tried so hard to be aware of my face, particularly because that's where usually they say it looks intimidating, it's scary. So I've tried to be aware of that and try to smile more often, even in the middle of a serious sort of like messaging, my use of words, and maybe giving that assurance to say, I'm not, it's not designed to scare anyone, but it's coming with the seriousness of what we're talking about. So I'm still on that journey, and I don't know if there's anyone who can help us. You and I'm afraid we are more in the same situation. But I must say, even myself, as I look back, there's much improvement as well. So it's just coming because of that self-awareness of my facial whatever expression as I talk and as I engage with the children. And if there's a joke, especially with the companion class as well that I'm teaching, like I said, I have been with them for some time. I try to smile often. I try, if there's a joke, I try also to laugh at their jokes as well, so that to try and remove that sort of like seriousness. And my colleagues as well, once in a while, I say that I highlight to them, guys, forget about my face. I put it in a joking manner to say, guys, forget about my face. Just listen to the substance of what I'm trying to say. So that has helped to some extent. I don't know amongst us if there's someone who can help us, but you and I seem to be in a similar sort of like situation.
Yes, brother Tapiwa. I believe that at times, she mentions that she's older than she was older than the supervisor. That in itself becomes also a point of departure, because at times, the younger one then is seeing certain traits of parenthood in the one that's older.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So that becomes a bit psychological. And at the same time, I believe that the other way of just helping in the process is being consultative. When you begin to consult with a person, and in that position that they are in, you are creating communication, and you are giving that person the responsibility or the position that they belong to. And it becomes easier for them now to understand that, okay, this is a working environment and this is my responsibility. And the intimidation, that aspect of being intimidated dissipates as time goes. So I believe that's the other thing. It's communication becomes the key. When you constantly have feedback or consultation and everything, just consultation from the person, because it's superior, actually is showing that respect of the position that they are in, and it sort of lightens the aspect of the relationship there. Yes. I don't know if ever there's anyone who thinks.
No, thanks very much. And there's also, I think it says Dudu from Dudu. She says that I have a voice that intimidates people, so I reassure people as I address them and declare it upfront when doing presentations or having a one-to-one meeting. So I think that can also be helpful. And she also says further, in other words, aware of what they might be seeing or hearing when they interact with you. Good sense of humor is very helpful as well.
Thank you, my leaders. It's just a comment on parts of communication we learned. I like the assertive part of communication. I was once in a club where we had one counselor who was from West Africa, a very assertive lady indeed. And as counselors, we realized that the generation of children we are leading find or maybe are so attracted to assertive communicators. And looking at us mainly, I'm sorry to say this, but from Southern Africa, most of us are not very assertive in communication, in that we find maybe when we become assertive, maybe we'll be showing some sort of rudeness or help me to think of something which is not proper. And then we found out later on that because she was an assertive woman, her students excelled in whatever she was, they excelled in their classes. And later on, we realized that as counselors, I think for our students to have a better relationship with us, we're supposed to be very honest in whatever we're doing and being assertive as well. It would lead them or groom them to be better leaders who will be able to stand up for themselves without maybe being respectful. That's just my comment.
Good day.
Hey, brothers and sisters. Yes, I was quite surprised that nobody spoke about conflict and communication problems that they have within their clubs. People would rather defer to workplaces and almost to shy away from the actual reality of conflict within the club. So the previous person touched on that. But I guess what the presenter was saying is this is what communication is all about, and this is how you can apply it within your club, because we don't make mention, he didn't specifically make mention of how it can be applied to the Pathfinder Club, because we know the reality that there are conflicts. We are all human beings, and it was just interesting for me to see that nobody spoke about that. Okay. Thank you.